My name is Linda Abrams, and I'm with Occupy Buffalo's education work group, which is called the School of Everything. And basically, the School of Everything was informed to support the goals of the Occupy movement. So, for example, we do teach-ins and teach-outs, panel discussions, and conferences that really bring to focus the values and concerns of the Occupy movement. So we have several streams. So one stream is our justice dialogues.
Saw those, they're great.
They're awesome.
They
and
are
we
wonderful.
have wonderful presenters, professors, and people who have expertise in different areas related to social, political, environmental justice come down and do talks, and these talks have been happening twice a week. So that's one thread, is the justice dialogue. We have an emerging thread called the Emerging Values of the New Paradigm, and those are talks on things like compassion, inclusivity, empathy, and basically it's a chance for people to develop skills like listening, meditation, stress management, nonviolent communication, and that sort of thing. And then we also have a very exciting thread called the Activist Toolbox, and in that thread we have hands-on teach-ins that really equip activists to be more effective in their activism. So it might be things like mapping social movements. It might be, just basic skills for organizing, different strategies. One I'm interested in doing eventually is subversive paper mache, using things like cardboard and puppetry to support, kind of our marches and protests and so forth. So that's kind of the toolkit series. And one of the streams we're developing now is the economics, past sacred economies, present dysfunctional economies, and future opportunities for where our economic system might go in terms of serving the common good. And we're actually organizing conferences at different universities, and we have one at a couple at libraries actually coming up. So those conferences are a chance for people to really understand how economy just affects everyday life.
Well, everything that you're doing, I have to commend you too, because it's really important. One is what you just talked about, teaching compassion, empathy, nonviolent resistance, caring, peace. These are things we're not even taught as we're growing up, or in our educational system very rarely through our family. So as adults, we come to a time like this, what you're doing is important. I also think it's kind of sad. I would like to see what you're doing brought into the educational system. I think it's very necessary that we're taught these basic, human skills to communicate with one another.
See, I think that, one of the challenges that we have is that our educational system is really supporting the status quo. So, in fact, it's referred to as the banking model of education, where the depositor, who is the teacher, makes deposits into the minds and the consciousness of students,
right,
rather than the students developing what we call a liberatory approach, where they become critical thinkers, questioners, cooperative. The model of liberatory education really focuses on valuing the knowledge and skills that everybody brings to the conversation. And so there's a different skill set that's really, kind of embedded in that model that isn't in our traditional banking model of education.
And this is important that you're teaching all of this to let the world know, and the rest of America, what embodies the occupations, what occurs within an occupation that's not seen in media and that's not seen if you don't go to an occupation.
That's right.
The other thing I wanted to ask you is, what is a teach-out?
A teach-out is, a teach-in is something that we might do on site when we had a site before we were evicted.
Yes,
we would
before
do,
the eviction.
Yeah, we would do teach-ins really to kind of educate ourselves and people who are supporters of Occupy Buffalo. Teach-outs are really bringing these information and these trainings to the street and to the community.
Beautiful.
So, for example, one of the other pieces of the School of Everything is we organize panel discussions, and they really create opportunity for dialogue. So, for example, 2 weeks ago, we were at the Evans Center Ladies Auxiliary invitation to speak at the fire hall to the Evans community, and then we've done several, panel discussions at Buffalo City churches. We've got a couple set up at the library. And basically, it's to really bring people into our process, which has been identified as inform, reform, and transform. Because I think the question I get most when I do these panels and teach outs is, what goes on at Occupy?
Right,
There's this sense that, there's this idea that, okay, people are camping out, and usually there's almost like this stereotypic kind of, assumption about who we are and what we're doing.
100%.
And actually, I'm a clinical licensed social worker with my own business, who's, kind of taught at the university level and so forth. And it's we have a cross-section of the community. And so we represent many, kind of aspects of the community. And I think that, when we go out and we speak as a panel, we really want to convey that this is a movement that has, very clear steps. But the first is to really inform people and let people become aware of not only the targeted issues, but who we are, because who we are has been marginalized in the main media.
Yes, it has. And it's really important is what you said, a cross-section. Because how is any real change, real sustainable change going to occur without a cross-section of people, right?
Exactly.
Right. You have to have everybody. So you have to have educators, from everybody to the unemployed, to someone on disability, to Social Security, who was in the service, who was doing this, who was a child, who was a teenager in college, to the elderly, Social Security, you name it.
Well, you look at our teach-ins, and we've had people who have been homeless give tips for winter survival or survival on the street.
No kidding. So you guys learned how to survive because in Buffalo, everybody, it's cold. Okay, so
that's right.
Interesting. So homeless people were able to educate on how to survive.
That's right.
Wow.
Margaret Mead, the anthropologist, said the ideal culture is one that finds a home for every human gift. And what I think is beautiful about Occupy Education and the School of Everything is we invite everybody to share what they know. In the summer and spring, we'll be doing skill shares. So whether that's martial arts, hula hooping, salsa dancing, playing a sport, whatever it is, everybody's got something to share, to strengthen and gift the community with.
It's kind of sad, but I think that's where a lot of the miscommunication comes from, where when people will view, say they just see a picture or a clip or a video clip, and they see all these different kinds of people, and they go, what a bunch of wackos or something.
Right.
Without ever going up, without ever talking to anybody. You just explained exactly what that is. Mm-hmm. It's a community.
That's right.
Anywhere.
That's right. That's right.
A collective.
That's right. And, and the thing that I think is important, oftentimes people, try to find what makes you the spokesperson of the 99%. In other words, how is it that 99% of the people can think alike? But actually, it's not so much that we think alike. You don't have to think alike to love alike. Most people, want good for their kids. Most people want to have adequate health care, a roof over their heads, some kind of peace of mind. I think there's so much more that unites us than divides us. And I think the educational piece is to really empower people to be participants in the kinds of conversations that affect their lives.
Very true. And that's a good point that you also made. A lot of really good points, because a lot of people are confused about 99%, 1%. What is that? I'm not the 99%. I'm the 1% because I make money. Well,
right.
No, you're getting it all confused. Mm-hmm. And what I always try to say is across the board, we all want the same thing, which is, basic needs.
That's right.
We want more than basic needs, but a lot of people don't even have basic needs. Love, care, compassion, everything just regular, like everything that you're speaking of when you're talking about doing these teachings and these talks. I think this is what's missing from all society.
That's right.
And like you said, when we go into the more corporate and the more, the people are being lost. All of this that you're talking about coming together as one people together. What was also important is you said we don't all agree, and that's true. If you've ever been up to a GA, and I keep telling somebody you have to go to a GA, it's not like everybody's holding hands and singing peaceful songs. They're discussions and decisions are being made.
That's right.
Everybody gets a chance to speak.
And that's what's different. I think many people have never had an opportunity to have a voice in decisions that directly affect their well-being or the well-being of the community. So I find that when people get together and really hear the amazing thinking that goes on. If you've been to a GA, sometimes it can be painful because it's a long process because everybody has the right to participate. But then from participation comes contribution. And we find that the contributions come across the board. And people that are really motivated to see benefit in their community, benefit in their families, benefit within themselves, have the energy to be determined and dedicated to making change. Much more so than somebody who isn't really connected with the community, who may be representing them, who may have, financial incentives to kind of use their vote that, betrays the common good. So I think when people participate in direct democracy, they start to have this sense of empowerment.
You're giving power back to the people.
Yes,
That's
and
what you're doing.
and that's the thing. I learned.
And people don't realize they have the power.
Right.
This is the thing that blows my mind. No, I can't do it. Oh, what if this happens? No, you can do it.
But we have a fear mentality and a divide and conquer approach to kind of systemic change. Even in our political system, there's so much competition. I actually spent time in the Amazon, and this one shaman said this beautiful thing. He said, there are two worlds that have nothing to do with each other. He said, one world is the world of predator and prey. And he said, and that's your world. Everything is competitive. There's status. One is up, one is down. And he said, and that world is very stressful, and it's all about, who's on top and who's on bottom. And he said, but the other world is the world of the creators. And he said, the task of the creators is to dream the world into being.
Wow, that's heavy.
Yes. And so, the vision we have for the School of Everything is that we all become co-creators of the world that we're dreaming into being.
And that's what I don't like to use the word should, but should be. But because of, everything that has, and we've allowed it all. I mean,
Sure.
But that's how it should be. That's how you see how the world should be. Not, and I don't like to use the word should, but lack of a better term, that's how it should be, and it's not. I was speaking before about how we're separated into financial classes, racial, faith-related, sexual, gender, you name it, whatever exists so much in America, the division.
Sure.
And I like to see it being brought all together. And I think that scares people.
I agree.
And I don't know why, because to me, I love to be around diversity because I learn. I'm educated here. Nobody here is like each other. I love that. There's not one single person here that I could say is like the other person. And I love that.
Well, I think there's so much fear that serves the status quo. If we're afraid to speak to each other, if we're afraid to cooperate, if we're afraid to get to know each other, essentially we remain cut off from each other, really cut off from our humanity. And I think that, one of the Occupy Wall Street presenters said something about it's about solidarity, not necessarily unity. We don't all have to come together because some people feel very threatened. Well, I'm very religious Christian, or I have these principles and I don't want to, become lost in Occupy. It's not about all of us becoming the same. It's about solidarity and really coming together to support the highest good of all.
When you speak about economy, another thing I found, very few Americans understand our economic system. So when we start talking about corporate and capitalism and 99% and Wall Street and all these things, people get very, very confused about the economic system and how it works, even if they're a part of it.
Sure,
And it's affecting them directly.
Right.
They still look at, I don't support Occupy, but they may be suffering. They may not be, I don't want to say educated. Maybe they just haven't researched it.
Well, I know I feel intimidated, and I'm learning a lot about economy, but I never had a mindset for economy. But for example, when I see people who are coming in to deal with, say, depression or mental health issues, we'll talk about their insurance, and we'll talk about how their rates have gone up, and their services have been diminished, and their medications are restricted to certain things. Why is that?
Interesting.
So then the conversation becomes the ways in which corporate influence has really limited the ability of people to truly get health care.
Right, yeah, I agree 100%. What you're doing is you're making it about applying it to them, to their life, to their situation.
That's right.
And then it helps them understand why
Exactly.
Occupy is occurring.
And every group has its own issues. Like when I was on campus at UB, one of the focal points of that group was student debt. Student debt has exceeded credit card debt as the number one form of debt in this country. And they don't often talk about it openly with each other. So we're going to have a Wear Your Student Debt event where students will have T-shirts and be able to talk about how deeply in debt they are. But that's an example of bringing it home. We don't necessarily have to have a big understanding of corporate personhood or money of speech to say there are things that are affecting my life that really are very oppressive.
It could be something as small as, here's a perfect example. Go grocery shopping.
That's right.
There you go.
That's
you can
right.
barely buy food. That
Yes.
affects everybody.
That's right. You talk to seniors who have to make the choice between healthy food and being able to afford their medications or their gas money. You know?
Yes. That's
Yes.
So see, this is what I want the world to understand, that here in America, most people can barely buy food, fill a gas tank, go see a physician, pay their medical bill,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
Let alone go out and enjoy, I don't know, go see a movie and go out to a restaurant and take a vacation. Oh, what is that, right?
Right. Right.
You're just trying to live. See, we're trying to live. We're trying to pay our bills and keep a roof over our head, and a lot of people don't.
That's right.
And most people that I know have the bare minimum, which is some food, some gas, and you got to keep working.
That's right.
You lose it all. It's
That's
gone.
right. That's right.
And that's a view of how I see America, which is why I support all the occupations. And I'm so glad that they had started, because the view I got globally from the world is they were like, finally, Americans are speaking. Finally.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yes.
It's about time, because you saw they're like, yay, Americans are speaking. You know what I mean?
And it's beautiful because I think it's like a fish in water. We don't necessarily see the environment we're in, where other countries, and I do a lot of international travel, and people think, we have crazy lives. Like, why do you people do nothing but work?
Yeah,
exactly.
It just. And another thing too, when I started talking, most people assume because we're here and it's a great democracy and we have all of these things and we all have money, and why are you doing this?
Right.
This is America, though. This stuff should not be happening here. That's how I feel. And I'll take blame because I wasn't paying attention for, 20-something years myself. Working, living, you know what I'm saying?
That's right. No, I think we're distracted and we're sold on this idea of comfort and convenience. So people work really hard to have, like the big screen TV or the high-tech phones and toys and things like that. And then to maintain that lifestyle, they stay kind of in sort of a trance. And I find that especially a lot of adolescents, they're really clueless about the things that are looming before them. I mean, one of the things I say to adults that say they're kind of afraid to be associated with Occupy, because sometimes people will start to get it and they'll say, but if I,
people have ceased speaking to me, literally.
Right.
Seriously. And I'm like, wow.
Right.
It's like, I'm not.
Well, people will say, I don't have tenure yet, or, if my boss finds out I work for a corporation. So there's this fear culture, but the reality is, if we don't have the courage to step up and address these issues, this is the legacy we leave our children. It is going to be a bigger problem.
That's a good point that you just made, because I look at what I like to, and I do have to make this point, is there's I see everybody from senior citizens to children. Look at their children here, and that's beautiful. What you said is very crucial, because the generation now, I think, is already confused. Nobody's guiding, right? I'm talking before the occupations, before the revolts, before all this stuff. Nobody's guiding. I think tradition has been lost. Basic values, manners, ethics. Okay, real simple things. I don't know where they've gone, and it's not everywhere, but in general, like for instance, you go out into traffic or you go out, when I was younger, how I grew up, it was just different, a different atmosphere.
Well, I think community has been really damaged by the focus on specialization. I mean, there was a time when you turned to your neighbors and you turned to your relatives for support, for advice, for guidance. Now everybody's sent to a therapist or a pastor, or you need to speak to an accountant. We have become such a specialized society, and what specialization does is it breaks apart community.
Interesting. So I've been looking for an answer for this. What happened to community when we used to have block parties and you go next door and you get sugar and eggs and milk from, and now it's like, oh, you know, you get someone will sue you. Don't give my child a sucker. Do you know what I mean?
That's right.
It's like, whoa, what kind of crazy world is this? you
But
know?
see, I think that as long as we become a culture that operates according to fear, and it begins with school, like a lot of the school policies. You know, for example, right now we've been at the Board of Education protesting the out-of-school suspension
I just saw that.
policies,
Yep.
you know, for kids that have been, you know, kind of accused of nonviolent offenses. But even in the suburban schools, you know, kids are threatened with these detentions, with out-of-school suspensions for all manner of rule violation. And I really believe the idea is social indoctrination, to get kids to fall in line, not to question, not to rebel. And I think that that posture really serves the interest of the dominant culture, to have people who are just prepared to follow rules. And I think there is a fear climate, because I grew up in a time when we had block parties, when
Me too.
my grandmother was a midwife. If people, you know, were having a
Exactly.
baby, they'd call her. She had no
Right.
medical she didn't even graduate high school.
Right.
You know?
Or you could get a job without a degree. How about that? And they trained you on the job in the hospitals and things like that.
Like they do in other parts of the world still.
Exactly.
But the more specialized we
Interesting.
become, the less we trust each other. And we only trust experts or people who have not only credentials, but specialized credentials. I just got a call this week by somebody who's looking to make a list of trauma therapists. And I've worked with trauma much of my life, but they want to see how many specialty credentials you have in addition to your license. So they're trying to, you know, the idea is that in order for the specialization to continue, you have to create new populations that have deficits and needs to kind of fill the demand for specialists. So as we become more specialized, we're less comprehensive, we're less community focused, kind of coming together with this idea that we can help each other. It's more all these different places we need to run to get our needs met.
That is so important what you just said, because you have no idea how many people come to me and ask that same question, what happened? You just explained it.
There's a wonderful book, it's called The Careless Society, and it's about the deliberate, you know, kind of breaking down of community and how it benefits the professional class. It's a very interesting book.
It's interesting, too, how you put education behind a lot of things that people see as conspiracy, right? Okay? People will say these stuff, oh, it's because of this, it's because of this, it's because, yeah, right. No, there, you proved it, educationally, through the years, say, 20, 30 years or so, right? All of this stuff has been accruing up until now to where it's affecting, it's like a disease process.
Right.
Right?
Right.
You know, you don't get it, you're stressed, you don't get it taken care of, all of a sudden you have a disease process occurring. Right?
That's right. That's right.
And it's like we have a disease society.
And what happens in the disease society, and part of the reason I got involved with Occupy, is that people that start to manifest symptoms of this distress, whether it's through depression, anxiety, oppositional behavior, you name it, are pathologized. And never, ever, ever do we look at the social conditions that are affecting those behaviors and those feelings and those experiences. So we medicate people quickly. We, you know, kind of create a passive, compliant society. And even especially with kids, because the reason I dedicate myself mostly to adolescents is typically adolescents are very quickly medicated if they're not falling in line in school. But if you think about it, some of the most brilliant people that have made, you know, kind of, you know, astonishing contributions, whether in the sciences, the arts, you name it, have been people that have thought outside the box.
Exactly.
Like I often give the example of the Wright brothers, two boys that would jump off the roof. We'd have them on Ritalin.
I did too. I said, no, what you saw? What if you saw that today? They're
That's
on a
right.
hill, right? They
Right.
got these fake bird wings on, right?
Right.
And they're ready to fly off into the air.
That's right.
The cops would be called.
That's right.
See, it's such a. What do I want to look? Strict. We think we have more rights, and it's actually
Less
way more
freedom,
strict, less
much
freedom.
more
When I
oppression.
was little, ran out the door at 11 o'clock. You played, you got cut, you got scraped up, you did all this stuff as part of growing up. Now today, oh my God, antibiotics, this and that, and all this. We need to stop. So this is why I'm happy. Oh, and speaking to you about this describes the whole society part of it. the educational part, that is a part of Occupy.
That's right.
Beautiful.
Every institution is affected by that tendency to isolate because it's a divide and conquer strategy. And Buckminster Fuller, who was one of the geniuses that really, I think, was a visionary that spoke to the Occupy values, he talked about the importance of comprehensive mind, meaning a mind that was multifaceted. I call it kaleidoscopic mind, that really looks to see the whole instead of just the little specific kind of like block or box. And so I think in the culture, when we specialize, we start to narrow the capacity for our minds to work brilliantly and comprehensively.
Do you speak regularly on these subject matters?
On the panels, I do, yes.
You should. I was just going to say, because if you don't, you should.
Yeah, I really enjoy it.
Because this is a lot of information that I know a lot of people are questioning. And they don't come to occupations.
Right.
Or they don't have time, or they're not interested in it, for whatever reason.
Sure.
This is important, this information that you're giving out. This applies to everybody.
Sure.
I mean, I don't even talk to the neighbors on my street. That's horrible.
That's the kind of society we're in. We're very isolated, but that isolation serves the status quo.
Exactly.
It
feeds the whole, what I like to call the machinery.
Exactly.
Feeds it all.
Exactly.
So I just spoke with several of you that gave such a very different view on what is Occupy.
Great.
That's absolutely wonderful.
That's great.
And you keep doing what you're doing. It's so important, this basic teaching of, I look at it, self. Mm-hmm. A lot about self is what you're doing. Self.
Well, also, I think, I'd just like to commend you because, there's a Hopi proverb, the one who tells the story rules the world. And we need to have our story told. Yes.
The one that tells the story gets attacked.
Yes. Yes.
I'm going to stick loud.
No, but...
Oh, my gosh.